Hey everyone, I'm Tammy Salenberger, the author of The One Inside 30 Days to Your Authentic Self. This podcast is for anyone curious about who they are, the different parts of themselves, and for those who want to connect with their true self. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I am so excited today to have Mary Kruger and Cece Sykes with me on this podcast. They authored a chapter in the Altogether Us book that's coming out this month because this podcast will be released in August. And so this amazing book is coming out in hopefully in a few weeks. And so let's start where we always start, which is where you are in the world and what you would see if you looked out your nearest window. And either one of you can start.
We're being polite.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I'm sitting in on the second floor of my house, and it's in like a little bay window, so I actually face the windows. That's why you see the sides of my room behind me. And I'm looking at trees. So where I live in Oak Park, which is just next to Chicago, is an older suburb. Most of the houses on this block are over 100 years old, 125 years old. So there's old trees on the block. So it's really pretty and green and nice, lovely. For where I live, when I live in this little room.
Spend a lot of time in your little room.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. That sounds lovely. And I like the idea of facing. Right now I'm in New Hampshire, and I'm in my son's room actually recording this podcast because it has carpet. And so I found it to be the best place to record. But I'm just staring at a wall, just sort of in front of me. It's just a wall.
Oh, yeah.
But I thought about moving. I'd have to move his bed around, but kind of moving because I'm working in this room a lot lately. And I thought about maybe moving some things around so I could be facing the window because I worked in North Carolina for 2 weeks. And I had a desk facing the window each time I was there. And I was like, this is really lovely to work where you're kind of facing the window. So facing a wall isn't as fun. Mary, what about you? Where are you? And go ahead.
I am facing a window, but actually this is my now full-grown man of a son's old teenage bedroom that I've transformed into my Zoom room. And I do a lot of teaching here. And when I work remotely, I work up here. And obviously redecorated, if you can look around. He didn't have it decorated like this, but anyway.
And Mary's room, I wish people could see your room, but Mary's room is this beautiful purple color, which I think the last time I saw you, Mary, that was not the color of that room.
No, it was navy blue. Yeah. And I still have all the band stickers on the door. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good. My mom heart is like, yeah, let's keep the band stickers there.
And he's getting the door when he buys his house. He's going to be buying a house. So I said the door goes with him. And
I love that. That's amazing.
I love that.
Yeah. But I do have like a beautiful view of like the woods or forest. And I live in a semi-rural area of Connecticut. And it's really nice. I can look up and see birds, and the trees and everything are very lush now. The garden's growing due to much rain. So I'm very fortunate. So I give my eyes a break and look outside and take a deep breath often when I'm working. It's really lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me about your chapter and why. So tell me about your chapter, whatever you want to say about it, and why, maybe sort of the subject of your chapter and why you decided to write it together.
Well, I'm sure Mary will have a lot to say about this too, but we've been doing things together a long time. Mary and I have both been in the community a long time.
Right.
Both of us since the late 90s, or, within a year of each other. And so we've been in the community a long time. And I think, so we always met at conferences and so forth over these last 25 years. It is now. And always connected personally. And we taught together. Maybe the first time we taught together, Mary, right, was in New Jersey.
That's right. Talked over dinner. Yeah.
We have some hilarious stories about teaching in New Jersey. But sneaking coffee from Dunkin' Donuts into our training that didn't have coffee. Mary sneaking it under and getting caught by security.
Getting in
Why-
trouble.
Why were you not allowed to have coffee?
Well,
It's a hotel.
a long story. The
Oh,
hotel
okay.
just was providing water, and people in New Jersey, what? I'm paying all this money and there's no coffee here?
And not even a bagel.
With it, there's nothing. So Mary and I decided to fix that, and
We're sneaking in the back door.
sneaking in a box of
Boxes of
coffee.
Joe. Yeah.
It was hilarious. And then, found a man walking around our training room with a little thing in his ear and a blazer. And we're like, he was security, he found our coffee.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh.
So anyway, we've all had a lot of fun together. So, and we connected around some similarities in our stories and our backgrounds and ways in which different sorts of addictive processes have affected our lives. And it was just a way that we connected. So we've always shared both the personal and sort of the idea piece around these issues for a really long time.
Yeah, I'd say, in some ways we're kindred spirits. And, I felt that from when I met Cece and when we worked together that time in New Jersey, it really got solidified. And, we do share a lot of similarities in our background. And then I discovered that we have a lot of same interests in how we like to use IFS. And we've been talking about writing something together for a very long time.
Right.
Yeah. And this opportunity popped up.
Yes.
We have.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we presented together in a couple different, on the continuity program, we presented together. And then at the conference, I don't remember the sequence, but at the conference we did like an institute day, a full day prior to the conference, I think for 3 years together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We presented that together and always had a lot of people there for that as well. So we've really been putting our ideas out there together, and we have our own way of looking at some things. And of course, obviously, a lot of shared perspectives. So it's been really fun, always fun to do things together.
And I think that was part of the neat part, is that we do share a lot about how we work, but we also have other pieces we bring in that are different.
Right.
And I think together it makes a really nice package, what we both offer. It's not either or, it just really works well, I think.
Yes. In a way, I just had this thought, Mary. Tell me if you would agree or disagree. I just had this thought right now. I'm kind of focused on an IFS way to work with addictive processes, and really a specific sort of, and have done a lot of thinking and concepts around that, separate from other treatment models in a way. And I feel like what Mary holds is bringing IFS and holding onto 12-step and other long-term, resources for addictive work. And it's not that I do. Again, there's no black and white around this, but I feel like Mary holds that piece a little more strongly than I do. And I hold this is what IFS can do piece a little more strongly. Our chapter's like that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But we both respect each other and what we're bringing. So there's Mary brings, holds what I do, and I hold what Mary does too. But we've also hold not separate poles, but just hold these two big pieces, because that's, I think, what's valuable about that is that I think IFS can actually be a real bridge out there between the psychotherapy community that has lots of attitude towards how to treat substance use and addiction, and the addiction world that has justifiably a lot of attitudes towards how psychotherapists view addictive work, and I think there's been a lot of apprehension and misunderstanding and separation between those two groups, as if they're different. And
yeah, that's been my desire, is to create a bridge. There is a huge polarization around how to treat, substance abuse, addictions, addictive processes. The psychology field holds on to, well, just deal with the psychological aspect, and the other treatment approaches are more looking at behaviors and spiritual aspects and stuff. And really, I think all of it is important, and I think IFS really offers a beautiful bridge to both. So that's been my dream, is to create a bridge rather than have this polarization continuing. Yeah. So if we
Right.
take what was effective and we put it together, we can become more effective. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's so
Yeah.
perfectly put, Mary. I mean, people will go to treatment centers and and they'll be, they have to be evaluated at the beginning of their treatment, and they'll be told, well, let's see. I mean, I've had clients come back to me and say, well, I could have gone into the addiction wing, or I could go to the trauma wing. And I went to the trauma wing, and the way this particular person described it was that actually validated their parts that don't want to see themselves of having difficulties with substances. So they felt like, well, so is this, and there's literally wings in the treatment center. So I understand that there are different dynamics here, but in IFS, we look at a person, an individual, as systemically. And we have a beautiful way of looking at the system of someone that includes the parts that act out, the parts that function no matter what, and what's underneath. And so we don't separate trauma from symptoms.
That's a really good point, Cece, because I have had numerous clients sign themselves in on the addictive or depressive track and completely not. A part of them probably did make the connection, but didn't want to look at that piece, because
right.
of
That's the other side.
The shame factor, of course,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
denial factor. Yeah.
Right. And you said to me a long time ago, Mary, something around eating disorders, like that, in a general sense, we're speaking in generalities, not every individual, but like the eating disorders treatment community considers themselves sort of like the clean addiction, like they know that it's, that's eating disorder. And that's so like, not those messy, really, really messed up people who are using substances. So, I mean, am I quoting you properly, Mary, about your quote about them?
Yeah, like that's in the hierarchy, that's not as bad
Right.
as being a drug addict or alcoholic. But in the meantime, we've been using Vyvanse and Ritalin to keep our weight down.
Yeah,
And we drink on the weekend. Yeah.
Yes. Like your case, Mary, about the opiates and the eating disorders, and going back and forth between those two in the chapter. So that I think that this is what I like to use the terms addictive process. Of course, I use the term addiction. Everyone understands it. But I really try to, even though it's a little clunky in a sense, addictive processes, there's this sense of people having to decide, am I bulimic or am I alcoholic? Am I a porn addict, or am I just acting out? And am I actually an alcoholic first and then am I into the porn later? Or is it the porn first? And what if in IFS we have a way to look at these? You have a few different firefighter parts, and they are engaged in an addictive process that's has very similar patterning in the inside of your world. Again, how can we soften some of these extreme polarizations? There's still boundaries and specific things in each of those areas that are important to know as a clinician about cutting and eating disorders and substances, alcohol and drugs, and separate differences there, et cetera, et cetera. But as a clinician, what can we do in the psychotherapy hour? How can we change the conversation after a relapse from just, have you called your sponsor? Have you been to a meeting? You haven't been going. We need a far more complex, nuanced, less judgmental conversation around how to talk to people about how they're coping.
Yeah, so we would, explore the systemic interaction of how they ended up having a relapse rather than getting into a whole thing like you didn't call your sponsor or such.
Right.
We'd say, it's not a problem. We're going to learn from that. So let's just sort of like track what happened, and we begin to look at all the systemic interaction of the parts. And it's a real shame reducer for people to be able to see that, I have a lot of stuff going on, but these different parts of me are trying to preserve me, and they've been working together as a team for a long time, and it's hard for them to let go, and we can really get into it from that perspective, and it's really, we're beginning to look at the person in a more compassionate and loving way, rather than you're a bad client because you didn't go to like 6 meetings in 6 days, or because you have relapsed. Yeah.
Okay, so to use that word relapse, like what I'm thinking of is, so we wouldn't do a relapse, or your relapse prevention plan is going to look very different, because it sounds like a relapse prevention plan that you might do in other modalities that would look like, I'm going to look at my parts. And the relapse prevention plan would really be about looking at the parts of me that were involved in the relapse.
Right, and getting full agreement from all the parts about what they're needing going forward, so they don't have to react in the way that they've been reacting. Yeah, rather than me cooking up a managerial strategy that they should follow, we're having them check in with their system and come up with something that their system agrees that they can pull off, that they can do. Yeah.
Right. So many. I find it's far more likely for people's managers to set up expectations they can't meet in some kind of a plan and then fail.
Sure.
And then their exiles feel shame again. And then they really do feel like they're going backwards rather than forwards, as opposed to saying things like, what will resource you? What do you think, what keeps you resourced? What do you notice helps you feel more, more balanced or more stable? What parts, what's getting triggered? What's your trigger these days? And I don't even like that word all the time, but where's your sensitivity? What's hurting? So
I like that word. So I think the word trigger feels so shaming to me. Like, oh, you were triggered by this. And like,
it's overused, and it can again feel like there's just the one thing.
right. Right.
One thing happened, and then I just went back to being a drug fiend.
Yeah.
This is sort of the conversation. And I think it's just, no one means it this way. No one having these conversations means it this way. But the end result is shaming and disempowering.
Can
And
we
there's a
talk a
path
little
that
bit
led them
about
there.
that? Sorry, go ahead, Mary.
I was just going to say, yes, there's a path that led them there. It wasn't just that one incident.
Right. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. That's that combination of, looking at the whole system.
So, for people that are listening and struggling either with any sort of addiction or any, like, so I want people that are struggling with any addiction definitely can sort of listen to this, but anyone that's sort of struggling with any sort of habit, like even if they're like sort of addiction, no, that's not me. I'm just listening for my clients, or, oh, I'm just listening for like the other people. Like, I want them to listen for themselves. Like, even like if it's a habit they can't do, they can't break, or whatever it is, like, I want people to kind of really listen for themselves and not just for the people they work with, like thinking of their own habits,
Right.
which I'm putting in quotes. Tell me about the difference between a manager-led plan and like turning into my system. So my manager-led plan might be, go on this diet, go to this many meetings, this many days, call your sponsor, whatever. It could be any of those things. What's the difference between a manager-led plan that doesn't have consent from all your parts and what you both are talking about doing instead?
Well, one of the approaches I use is sometimes I'll ask the person to talk a little bit about the time that they had the very same experience that caused them to use that they didn't use. And I have them check in about what was it within them, or what was it that was different that enabled them to not use in that moment. And so they can usually name a couple of things. Was there even an exception for a nanosecond? And then I'll say, well, so it tells me you have it in you to go in a different direction. So what needs to happen for those parts, for you to turn in that direction instead of the direction you turned in? And really checking in with their own system.
I like that. And I also say, to tell you the truth, Tammy, I don't have that many conversations about plans. Just even the plan is stressful, but even sobriety or what they want, I say, what is your vision? What are your hopes? What are the parts that are on board with that? And what are the parts that are scared you can't? And what are the parts that don't want to yet? So if we don't really have, I think in IFS, the benefit of people having parts is that they don't have to have a unified vision for themselves. I understand, of course, it's good to say, I want to keep talking to my sponsor, or I don't. So many of my clients are in 12, have been in 12-step, and many have not. So depending on their situation. And so for someone else, I might be, what they're really working on is their, what in traditional terms we kind of call their codependent parts. They're parts that are giving themselves away and giving all their energy away, and no longer drinking or using porn, but totally eating at night. So we're just, they've been, now that's what's happening, and now that's what's struggling. So beginning to look at, I always say, people I think it's a universal thing that we can all universally understand the idea of having some part of us or some activity that another part of us doesn't like and wants to change. It's one of the essential early exercises we do in a training. Find the other parts that don't want you to have that part or want to change that part. It's a classic intervention that we do in all our trainings. And so everyone can relate to that. And so in IFS, we always said those parts are hinged. People come in with a lot of managers that tell us what they need to do around their firefighter behavior. And we, first of all, have to know I'm listening to a manager. And if I don't unblend that manager, then all the work is done from the point of view of that manager. That's not really very good work. It's limited. So the managers and firefighters are hinged. So I was just talking with someone this morning about someone who was doing a bunch of eating from 6 p.m. till 2 a.m. and just really stressing out, getting health issues. Well, this person also has enormous issues in her family and a mentally ill child, and husband's not working, and all these kinds of issues. So her managers are on overdrive all the time. So the problem isn't that she eats. One of the things she does to cope is eat, and other issues are the way that her other parts feel responsible for other people's inner world, other people's functioning. So we have to expand the problem. And so often people and this came up in our chapter, people are judged if they're doing well or not as to whether or not they're still drinking. And if they're still drinking, they're not doing better. Even though their relationship, like in the chapter, the relationship with the mother's changed, the relationship with the husband's changed, the relationship of how they do work has changed, all of that has changed, and there's still some drinking or using periodically. So traditional definition is until you're sober, you're not doing well. And I want to, and I get that. I mean, I get that that's an issue, but what we're looking at is not so black and white. And what is the progress along the way? I think the firefighters are often there's some firefighters are going to stay on there at their post till the bitter end. So in terms of the plan is really the plan to look at my whole system and work all the way. I say work all the way around the triangle, all the way around all three parts all the time, not just on whether I use.
Yeah, I love that. Mary, what would you add or change about what Cece said?
Well, I just think that, a lot of folks come in with manager plans. They want a toolbox. I hear that all the time. And sometimes, even though that's not really my approach, I'll give them something to do. Or maybe they have something and they'll come back and they won't be able to do it. And then we'll use that as a diagnostic way to get into the system. So, yeah, because it is usually someone's manager, whether it's my manager, a manager from a program, or their own managers that's cooked something up. Even in the case you were talking about, Cece, I'm guessing that your person you're discussing had a manager that had an eating plan for them during the day, which was probably not healthy and restrictive. And then the person got stressed and they hadn't had enough to eat to begin with all day, and they went to the fridge. So it was just a downhill slide, but there was a systemic interaction that went on there. So that's what we do. We start to discover what that is, because that's what leads people back to you doing those behaviors again. The other thing I would add is that I think for anyone that is engaging in extreme firefighter behavior, I think that some folks, it just sort of like goes away as we do the work, and others, they probably meet the qualification for like a substance use disorder or a serious addiction of some sort. Those folks still need to get credit for any harm reduction that they do over time, because their parts are experimenting.
Yes.
And that's how I look at it. They're experimenting and they're seeing what would it be like if we had a day without this, you know? And
Yes.
once those parts have done a field test and they see that it can be safe, they become more willing to make shifts because they don't want to cause damage to the person's system. That's not their goal. And they begin to see that they have been. So I do believe that most people do the warm chicken versus the cold turkey approach. I'm stealing someone's line, but I love the
I
idea of warm
love that
chicken.
line.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
that's right.
yeah,
By
yeah.
the time people come to see us, they've tried to change this, 40,000 times. And if they're seeing us, they feel they have failed all of those times.
Right.
So hopelessness is really a huge part that's there. I love what Mary's saying, and I love the trying on of new behaviors. And that's where you're also naming where the word plan can come in, which is my client says, here's my plan. I used to have a client that got on the scale every morning and said, today I'm going to be different every single day. That's a plan. That's an agenda. That's a manager, and that's a setup, right? We'd say,
Right.
by 8:15, I've just had 2 breakfast McMuffins,
Right.
I'm
Another part
already
came in and
screwed,
said, forget about that.
and then I'm off. So, but what would happen if they didn't start the day from that place? What would happen if how could we help that part sit back? So you could start with, whatever happens, I'm going to just do my best today. What if I didn't have a plan? So I love what Mary's saying, is listening to, with the nuances of that kind of language that someone's using, in IFS terms, what their managers are trying to set up for their firefighter behavior, is so powerful to help people unblend. They may not change today, but an unblend is to get to know those parts. I would say,
I think
yeah, we're
I
not
think what
going in order to change them. We're going in to relate to them. Go ahead, Mary.
I just think we're talking about a really complex set of interactions, and the approach has been linear. If I do A, B is going to happen. And with
Right.
our approach, we're talking about looking at the whole picture and how complex it is, and that complexity doesn't just change overnight.
Right. So even though it's scary to work with a client who's still engaging in high-risk behavior, which it is, scares my managers, it scares their managers, it scares their family members' managers. So it can be really scary. But if we work with those fears, because I always say the other alternatives, go into treat. How many times do people go into treatment if they can, at 50,000 a crack, and then come out and start again, and then feel that sense of failure because they went in and came out? So I try to help my parts when I'm feeling scared to know it takes everybody a pretty long time, but this is where we're moving forward. So some people can have it would appear to be able to have a fairly significant one-time change, like kind of dramatic, like they can go in, they could do some work, they can come out, and they can sustain that work. And for other people, that may not be their pattern, and we just want to hang in with them and not give up hope. That's the therapist's role.
I think a lot of times too that parts didn't really have a full buy-in to going to programs.
Yeah.
And part of my work with clients is to check in with all the parts of the person to see if there's a full buy-in, because if the part that's engaging in the behaviors isn't on board, it's not going to work. So I often ask people, if they've been to treatments before, what was your, let's say, eating disorder? What was the party that likes a drink saying while you were in the program? No one's ever asked them that question. And then you can get down to what was really going on in the person's system, right? And sometimes they'll say things like, we just decided to follow suit so we could get out of there.
Right.
All kinds of stuff where we're going to do it better next time and we're not going to end up here. And so many different things. And if this component could be addressed in a treatment facility or prior to the person going, I think the chance of a person moving along in a way that's more beneficial to them would really be heightened. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the bridge, because you both use that word. You use the word bridge and you use the word path. And I'm curious about what those words mean to you when you think about bringing IFS and AA or 12 step, and you think about bringing these I don't want to say programs, that doesn't sound right, but sort of bringing these two worlds together. I'm just curious sort of what you think about when you think about those words, bringing these two worlds together.
It's kind of everything we're saying, which is that first of all, just to address the fact that there has been literally community centers go through this door for the anxiety and depression and go through that door for substance abuse. So these kinds of separations, part of it is the paradigm shift around what if we start thinking about all kinds of addictive processes with food, with substances, with behaviors, spending, sexual preoccupations. What if we begin to think of all of those parts of us as trying to help? That's a pretty big paradigm shift. Of course, they have high risk, and as we think about their intention. So if we get to know their intention and that they have some reasoning behind their behaviors, I like to say, what if those parts are a lot more complex than they look? What if there's more to them than meets the eye? And even the managers of people get that those parts, like teenagers who say, F you, I don't need you near me, I don't need any help, I don't need to control. We know that angry teenager is suffering. We know the firefighters, that there's enormous suffering in the system behind firefighter behavior. So I think it starts with a paradigm shift. When as a clinician, I'm trained to welcome my depressed, anxious client with an open heart, to appreciate and expect that they'll learn to understand why they engage in their behavior, that there's reasons behind their symptoms, and to really and to believe what they tell me. But if you begin to work with someone who's sent to you for substance use, you're told to be wary. When is the addict lying? When their mouth is moving. To mistrust, that they will manipulate you, that they're trying to get away with something, that they don't care about change, that they're just trying to placate. I'm not saying everyone believes that about every client, but there's sort of that viewpoint clinically.
Yeah, you talked about the attitude, right? There's sort of a different attitude on both sides, of whether you're going in the addiction door or the psychological treatment door. There's a different attitude that we hold, whether we're the patient or the clinician. We all have this attitude towards these two doors.
Well, we're all clinicians, and primarily we are training clinicians. And so we're helping people look at what parts of me are holding stigma, are holding prejudice, are holding judgment toward my own and other people's firefighters. And I think just starting to begin to look inside myself and inviting other clinicians to look inside around what comes up for us, what are our actual parts around these issues, is where to start. And that's a big bridge. Why wouldn't we welcome someone into our office with the same open heart as who's suffering from substance use and eating disorders as we would with someone who's depressed? It's something for us to think about, I think.
I think there's internal and external bridges. We have divisions in how to approach treating people with extreme firefighters. We have the psychology community that thinks, well, we'll just deal with the psychological aspect and it will be all set. Then we have the medical community that thinks we'll just deal with the biological. We'll come up with medication, or we'll come up with some sort of biological treatments. And then we have the spiritual community that thinks we'll pray it away. And the truth is, all of these things are important components in the external environment to have people's parts really get on board with that. Too many clinicians will say, I only work with trauma, I don't work with addictions. It's not possible. Or I only work with alcohol issues, I don't work with porn issues. Not possible, because all of that's in our room. And if we don't get if our parts are in the way, those parts are not going to emerge because they won't feel welcome. And that's the other part of the bridge. I have to work on my parts to welcome all of those in the room. Even the founders of, the original 12-step program, Alcoholics Anonymous, suffered from what we now call, quote, cross addiction. And IFS, we would say, they have various firefighters. So to treat one and not look at the whole system, that's the internal bridge. We're leaving the person stuck in the same old cycle, only just using something else. I have a friend that used to say, she would say that, she was in recovery from alcohol, but she'd be sitting at the at the meeting staring at the anniversary cake because she also had an eating issue that they didn't talk about.
Right.
So that's also an important piece is bridging, having our parts also create connections with each other and see how they interact with each other, So
Yeah.
there's a lot of bridges.
Right. It's a good way to put it, Mary. So bridging, looking at the bridge between the clinician and the client and what comes up in that, and then looking at the bridge within the client, but also sort of the overall clinical bridge of, can we create a bridge between, right, the eating, the porn, the money, the spending, the gambling, so many of these things. So what if we can create bridges between these parts and just begin to look at how one part, how often do we hear someone got sober and then they got hooked on the bad relationships, right? They can't, picking the bad boyfriend or getting obsessed with this person or rescuing some woman and her 4 kids. And now this is my mission in life. And so, and no, I'm not drinking.
I was bad, but now I'll be an enabler because I have shame and guilt that I never let go of. I didn't.
Yeah. So now I'm rescue.
Well, and I love that you said that about I think you said that earlier about the path, right? Like if I just look at, with your client, Cece, the one that, is eating at night, if I just look at that part and I don't look at the wider path of the parts who are codependent or enabling, right. The pattern of all the parts that then trigger, which I'm putting in quotes, this sweet core part that's eating, that's just trying to deal with all the crap that happened from these other parts all day. Like, so I need to look at all of those parts, like the parts that like you said, like the pattern of all the parts that are contributing to the firefighter who was just trying to rescue.
Right. And it's also natural to feel frustrated, like you want to grab someone by their collar and give them a shake. It's natural to feel judgmental. They've stolen from their grandmother. They've stolen from their family. They've lied. I mean, they have all those things have happened. There's enormous chaos been created. Kids been ignored. Families falling apart. So there's enormous pain there, and there's enormous suffering. There's a lot of chaos there. It's really actually also sort of inevitable. I would say firefighters are like this, I think it's centrifugal force. They go round and round and they just sort of pull in manager attention. Like you just feel almost compelled to want to get this thing in order here. And so do their loved ones, the people who love them. To love, it's not shaming to want to rescue someone. You want to think about that, right? Self-led decision-making, but it's not, you don't want to shame someone for wanting to rescue someone, for therapists who want to rescue their clients. But
it's easy for us to get hooked into the systemic dynamics, especially if we have had our own personal experiences with that. And one of the things that IFS has brought, I think, really to the forefront is the importance of our parts, but also how to work with them. And I have to be able to, working with folks with like Extreme Firefighters, be able to really be aware, am I being too overly caretaking? Do I have a part that's being too harsh, a part that feels disgusted? All the different things that can come up with me. So I can really be present with the person, because it's not about me feeling sorry or being nasty and mean and strong. It's about me being able to be there and present and still be clear in the things that we need to have happen between us, in a loving way. Yeah. I learned that from some folks that weren't even clinicians, about there's ways to talk to folks that are really struggling with extreme firefighters without shaming them, and still get a message across that connects with them, that they can connect with. Yeah.
I love that. And that might feel hard to kind of tease out, like what's a manager part of me that wants to fix or have a plan, either for myself or for my clients or for my family member, is that might feel like it might have a little bit of a self, well, no, like, well, I need a plan, or I want a caretaker, I want to help. But that could be super manager part led. And again, for myself or for my client or for my family member.
Yeah, and
Go ahead, Mary.
and activated by hearing the client say, I'm not getting any better, or the family members saying they're not getting any better. And all of a sudden, the clinician has parts saying, oh my God, I'm a terrible therapist. I better come up with something.
Right, because
Let me get my biggest managers out.
Yeah,
Come up with a
yeah.
plan.
The plan, the
My
plan.
toolbox.
because
Yes.
everybody's so scared, right? Or feeling, wanting to get things, the old, I'd like my daughter to be seen twice, her eating disorder to be fixed because she's heading off to college August 15th. So I'd like her to be seen twice a week so you can fix this thing before she gets there. So that kind of pressure that family and, people that family and the client feels, and then as Mary said, it falls onto the clinician. But I think it's also just to accept that this will happen. We will feel pulled in, or we will feel judgmental, or we will feel like we need to rescue. Some of my people say, see, I want to give them an eating disorders clinic. I want to give them suggestions. Can I give them advice? I keep a journal, and I go, give all the advice you want. It's probably great advice, but then when they don't follow it, you have to go back to being a psychotherapist. So because there are good things to suggest, and it is, well, let's make a plan. There's nothing wrong with having that conversation and thinking about it, but it's the nuances that Mary's talking about and that I'm talking about, which is, and when it doesn't work, or what parts don't want to do the plan, or what do you predict will be a part that could give you stress around this week. So not a right or wrong, but not trying to get into a moral place about what's good or what's bad. But really always, every time anyone says to me, this is my, I'm not going to use blank, I say, okay, that's great. Tell me more about that vision. I want to make a lot of space for it. Now, who is everybody else in there is listening? Who is worried about this plan? Who's a little scared about it? Who says no effing way? Right? Excuse my almost language, but so.
Well, that's such an important question.
Yeah.
All right. And we just, in IFS, we can make the space for that.
Yeah.
It's built into the system. It's built into the model. And that's where I think, as this bridge we're talking about exists, it's not always built in to deal with that kind of polarity, or that level of complexity is not built into every model. And this is what the recovery world complains about psychology. As Mary says, you can't just think your way, talk therapy your way out of this without ever bringing up the issue of what you're using. But on the other hand, you can't just behavior manage your way out of this. Or if you do, it's going to be that white knuckle world that's very stressful.
Yeah. I think I was just thinking a little bit more about this. We talk about exiles in IFS, and we talk about the little ones being the exiles, but these other parts, this reminded me as you were speaking, Cece, about asking if everyone else is on board. These other parts, these firefighters are also exiled. They're not welcome to be heard. They're not, we don't inquire in them. We just try to get rid of them,
Right.
That's not working.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I don't use that term because I feel like it's so confusing to say that they get exiled because they aren't exiles. But I know what you're saying. They get judged and pushed away. I was working with somebody once, and she had been clean and sober, as she said, for 35 years. But what she ended up working on in that session was the young mom she was who used to drink and finish her husband's drinks, and he would give her some of his drinks, etc., for a period of time. And to go back and listen to that part, because as Mary is saying, I don't use that term that they're exiled, but I agree with Mary. It's like so many manager parts don't want to go near that again. And it's advised almost like move on. So it's sort of counterintuitive to go back. And check in with those parts, or you've given up something and now you're into food, but you gave up alcohol, whatever you're doing, different kinds of drugs you're using in college. You've given all that up. But what happens when you go back and listen to how those parts are trying to help you at the time? It really creates compassion, clarity, and compassion in the system. And like Mary said, when we give those parts a seat at the table, in whatever way we do that, it fills out the person's, their balance, their psyche. It makes space. There's not, basically they're held in some kind of place of shame or fear.
I think we're talking about welcoming their voice and their wisdom.
Yeah, you got it.
And
How are you trying to
not
help me?
listening.
You got it. How are you trying to help me? How have you been trying to help me? And like this woman, help me because I was scared about being a mother. Help me because I didn't know how to actually be a wife. Help me, she just could hear all the ways this part. Then that's a beautiful thing that this model allows us to do.
Or this is what my system really needs. I'm only here because I can't get this, but if I could just have this, then I wouldn't need to do this.
So much to learn listening to those firefighters.
Coming up for me about that is that makes sense with, when our little ones are exiled, then we aren't able to live in the fullness of our voice and our true self, because, beautiful parts have been pushed away or locked in the basement or exiled. So doesn't it make sense that the same is true for our firefighters, right? Like when they've been pushed away, there's some sort of special giftedness that we aren't able to fully live into who we are because there's a part of us that's been pushed aside or locked away. So that makes so much sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it also makes sense to me that our managers say, no, not going there. And that can be a part of the healing path too. No, not going there for now. No, it's just out, done. There is some psychological stuff around saying absolutely not. No, the simplicity of that, no can be very, very supportive to change. And say, nope, I don't do that. Nope, nope, I don't talk about it. Nope.
Right, and they have good reason to.
Right, and that can be a really important part of recovery. So again, if that's what the parts are saying, I'm not here to disrupt that. Even if it's, what are they afraid would happen if it'll all fall apart. So I might, sometimes it's just like, okay, that's what we do. We listen to the system. We don't have, that's another way that we're coming at this thing, is we aren't coming at this as the authority. And that's another paradigm shift. I don't think anyone means this, but when you're told that you must just listen to your sponsor, just listen to what you're telling, just do what you're told, I understand that because that person's chaotic. And if they do listen, it will be better. I understand that directive. But when they can't, what else can we say? So in IFS, we don't come at it as that authoritative place. We might say, this and this and this would be useful. Do you have any parts that would agree with that? But
some people are not ready to delve in, and that's the opposite extreme. They've been pushed into it, and it's led them back to the self-destructive behavior again because their system wasn't ready. So I'm with you about sometimes we have to honor the no because the no is really important. I remember my former husband was in treatment. They wanted him to work on his Vietnam issues.
yes.
I mean, he was only like day 10 there, and his part said no, and he didn't do that for a number of years because his parts knew that if he did that, he would drink. So sometimes the no is really knowing your system. It's not just fear.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. It's not just fear. There's wisdom in that, not now. And
yeah. So the question is, it's okay. We don't have to. And so just tell me, had you ever been pushed into it before and what happened?
yes.
I agree. I see why you don't want to do that right now. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I really want to underscore what Mary just said. Asking people who come in, what is your previous experience? What have you been told? What diagnoses do you have? Do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? Do you have parts around what you've been told? Some people are told, some people embrace their label. Yes, I'm an alcoholic. And it feels like heaven to say that. Like that is paradise. Like I'm done. I'm clear. I know this and I'm good. And they don't mean it in a judgmental way, but they mean it in a sort of an embracing way. And for someone else that felt shame-based and like there was no hope. So we can listen in IFS. What have you been told? How did that land on you? What did that feel? Did that feel right and true for you? And that's what we can listen. When IFS, the therapist is considered a collaborator, not an authority. And that's a real difference.
I love that listening. I love that. It's like we're going to listen to everybody. We're going to listen to the one that says no. We're going to listen to the one that says yes. We're going to listen to the one that says do this, don't do this. Like we're just going to be in a place of listening. At the same time, we're listening to our own parts that have opinions and want, whatever ideas they have. But we're going to be listening, doing that dual listening where I'm listening to my own parts. And I'm also really listening to their whole entire system, all the dynamics and what everybody has to say.
Yeah, that's right, Tammy. As usual, this has been fun, Mary.
Yeah.
Nice to see you. Mary and I haven't seen each other in a while.
Been terrible. I've been wanting to come to Chicago or something. Yeah. I'll see you at the conference for a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
I saw your picture. I'll tell you later. I saw your picture on the networker. Yeah. Yeah. So, I think what I would
like,
say.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't know
famous. I think I would just really say that especially for folks that might be reading the book and reading our chapter, to just like maybe allow yourself to become open to looking at, addictive processes in a different way, to not align yourself with just one way, but to broaden your scope and to look at the whole picture when working with folks, and to also work at the pace that works with our client, really working collaboratively with them and listening to them and helping them to become empowered in their own recovery process. So, and to look at our parts also that get aligned or activated. It's a lot of work, but I actually love this work. I get really bored sometimes if I don't have this kind of work to do. So that's what I'd add. It's not for the faint of heart, but definitely it's really great if you really like it.
Energizing. You got it, Mary.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I just want to say, the first part of the chapter, I'm working with the clinician who's working with a couple. So as much of the work is my interventions to the clinician who says the classic thing, Cece, I get what you're telling me to do. I understand this, but actually doing it is really hard. Not judging the part, when someone shows up drunk and high to their session, so a big part of it. So it's really a connection. It's not to say the clinician has more problems with the client or whatever, nothing like that, but to say we have parts, the client has parts. It's systemic. So there's also a system between our system and our client system. And for many of us who are attracted to working with trauma and with the addictive processes that most people use to cope with trauma, have our own background with trauma, attachment wounds, and addictive processes in our families and people we loved. So we need to know how that's all landed for us. And anything we learn inside ourselves, we can share better with our client. So just for everyone listening, that not in no judgment, but to open our hearts to our own process. And as Mary says, expand the scope. Just listen with a little bit of an open mind to the paradigm shifts around this. Welcoming firefighters. And I have to say, I'm going to make one more plug. My book also came out this year. So anyway, check it out. Mary, I wrote along with Martha Sweezy and Dick Schwartz on IFS for addiction. So it's everything I said is in there. Just a lot of IFS thinking is in there. And and IFS approaches are stuff that's consistent with what both of us think.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much. I'm super excited that we got to talk today, and it's good to be with both of you. And I look forward to this book coming out and seeing you at the conference.
Perfect.
I'm looking forward to seeing you too. And if anyone's wanting to work a little bit on their parts, we're running a little workshop up in Rhode Island, Terry McCann's new eating disorder facility, Journey to Yourself. And if anyone wants to get in touch, they can email me. It's just a one-day thing that we'll be doing. So if anybody is wanting to work on some of their parts. that's going to be September 30th. It's a Saturday. So,
Perfect.
and there's hotels nearby if someone wanted to drive up. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah. Yep.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you both so much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you for the opportunity. It was so nice to see you again, Tammy. Hopefully
Yes.
I'll see you in Portsmouth.
Yes, I know. Are you coming up soon?
Yep. I am in August.
Yeah, shoot me a text. I would love to see you.
I will. I'm going to make my reservation today.
Okay. Good.
It's nice to see you, Cece, again.
It is. It's
All right, bye.
great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Bye
All
now.
right,
Bye.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, like, all the things. My book is available at your favorite independent bookstore or all the places books are available. You can also visit my website, tammysallenberger.com, where you can download a free meditation on getting to know your should parts. You know, there's parts of you who remind you of what you should be doing. They sound a bit critical at times. Yes, we all have them. You can follow me at IFS Tammy on Instagram and Twitter and the One Inside Facebook page. I'm so grateful for Jack Reardon, who created the new music. Jack is a graduate of Derek Scott's IFS Stepping Stone program. Thanks, Jack, for getting me. And to you, thanks for listening.